In just 7 minutes later, Donald Trump's face turned blood red, his fist slammed the oak desk, and he barked, "Cut it, now!" as 38 million Americans watched live. But Jasmine Crockett didn't even blink. She raised a trembling letter from a 13-year-old girl, silenced for 9 long years by a $125 million hush deal, and spoke just one chilling line. What could a child write that made a former president look like he'd seen a ghost on live TV? The red tally light blinked once, then locked solid. Live, no edits, no do-overs. The air inside the congressional oversight hearing was thick, electric, like a storm had been waiting all morning to crack open the walls. Rows of reporters shifted forward in their chairs, fingers hovering above keyboards. Producers whispered behind glass. The world wasn't just watching, it was holding its breath. Jasmine Crockett stepped into the room in a crisp navy blue suit, heels clicking like metronomes on the marble floor. Her expression was composed, sculpted, almost cold, but her right hand just barely trembled at her side. Tucked under her arm was a thin leather folder, worn at the edges. Inside it, a single envelope, sealed, yellowed, and handwritten in blue ink. It was from Jane Doe, a name that had never made the headlines, but whose story, if read aloud, could shatter careers, ignite movements, and silence even the loudest man in the building. That man, Donald J. Trump, sat just 12 feet away, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room. His tie was too bright, his smirk too rehearsed. Flanked by Republican loyalists and media lapdogs, he wasn't called to testify, just to observe, according to the committee. But everyone knew this hearing was a stage, and Trump believed he was still the star. Jasmine didn't look at him, not yet. Her eyes scanned the nameplates on the dais, the cameras embedded into wood panels, the expressions of lawmakers who hadn't read what she held. This wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about politics anymore. It was about a girl, 13 years old, who had written a letter and trusted it to survive. A girl who had once asked, "If I write it down, will anyone ever read it?" Jasmine was here to answer that question, and in less than an hour, 38 million Americans would be watching her do it, because sometimes the most explosive evidence isn't leaked by a whistleblower or hacked from a server. It's handwritten, sealed in paper, and signed by a child no one believed. What could possibly be inside? That would make a former president lose control on national TV. She hadn't planned to take the meeting. Too many scams, too many victims with shaky stories and hidden agendas. But when Jasmine Crockett stepped into that dim, windowless office 2 months ago, everything changed. No cameras, no aides, just a nervous man in his 60s clutching a fireproof envelope like it might burn through his palms. He was Jane Doe's lawyer, but even he had never met her face to face. Everything came through encrypted calls, mailboxes, codes. That's how deep the fear still ran. He slid the envelope across the table. Jasmine opened it slowly. Inside, a photocopy of an NDA, 4 pages. The print was dense, legal boilerplate, but the signature at the bottom, Donald J. Trump, stood out like blood on snow. Next to it, the initials, JD, a girl, 13, and next to that, a wire transfer, $250,000, sent from a Delaware LLC to a medical support trust in Nevada. Jasmine traced the paper trail with her fingers. 3 shell companies deep, 2 law firms in between. It was designed to disappear, but someone had kept a copy. Back in the hearing room, the mood had shifted. The Republicans were rambling now, defending the sanctity of American elections, accusing Democrats of staging circus hearings. Jasmine stood unmoved, her breath steady, her eyes locked on truth, not fear. She wasn't here for sound bites. She was here because a girl had asked, 9 years ago, if writing it down would matter, and Jasmine had said yes. She tapped the folder once, the way a drummer finds the beat before the drop. Her heart pounded louder than the voices in the room. The papers inside weren't enough to convict. Not yet, but they were real, and they led somewhere. Somewhere no one in that room wanted to go. Because the most dangerous rooms in America are the ones that don't appear on floor plans. No logs, no cameras, just walls, a lock, and silence. She whispered under her breath, "Room 4C. What if justice isn't about finding the bomb, but following the silence right to where it's buried?" The room was loud until it wasn't. A gavel struck once. Jasmine Crockett's name was called. The buzz died. Chairs stopped squeaking. Even the air seemed to freeze in place. She rose without hurry, one hand on the leather folder like it carried more than just paper, like it carried someone's life. No speech, no theatrics, just a calm walk toward the microphone, heels tapping the floor like a warning. Trump didn't look at her. He leaned back, smug as ever, whispering something to an aide, clearly unbothered. Jasmine set the folder down, opened it, and carefully removed a sealed envelope, yellowed, creased, and marked in a 13-year-old's handwriting. She placed it beside the microphone. The room didn't move. Then she leaned in, eyes steady, and read aloud. "Dear Mr. Trump, I was only 13, and you promised I'd be safe." A sound escaped the room, quiet, sharp, and unmistakable. Someone gasped. A few papers dropped. One cameraman cursed under his breath. Trump shifted, subtle but real. His fingers curled against the armrest, and his eyes darted toward the door like someone calculating distance. A murmur spread through the back of the room as aides exchanged panicked looks. Her spine didn't shift. Her voice was iron-wrapped in calm. She stood like the words weren't from paper, but burned into her memory. The committee chair cut in, tight-lipped and shaking. "Congresswoman Crockett, I remind you, this is not a criminal trial. Please maintain decorum." Jasmine turned her head slowly, locking eyes with Trump for the first time since she walked in. Her tone didn't rise. She didn't need to shout. "I'm not here for your decorum," she said. "I'm here for her." The room held still. Trump didn't speak. Couldn't. That one sentence hit harder than any headline, louder than any microphone. For the first time, his silence said more than his bluster ever could. And as the cameras zoomed in, millions of viewers leaned forward, hearts racing, wondering the same thing. What else was in that envelope that could make a man like Trump go pale on live TV? For 30 seconds after Jasmine finished reading, no one moved. Trump kept his gaze fixed ahead, jaw clenched, one thumb twitching against the table. The spell wasn't broken, but it was bending. Then came the next name. "Ethan Brill, please approach." A thin man in his early 30s stood up from the side bench, nervous eyes buttoned up too tight. He didn't look like a whistleblower. He looked like someone who'd spent most of his life being ignored until the wrong person gave him the wrong order. He sat, raised his right hand, and swore the oath. Then he placed 3 documents on the table, sliding them across like they were radioactive. Jasmine leaned forward, nodded once, and tapped the top page. "Tell them what this is," she said. Ethan swallowed. "That's a financial statement from May 2016. Internal routing document. It shows a transfer of $450,000 from an LLC named Red Sable Holdings to a nonprofit called the Minerva Foundation." He glanced at the second. "This one's from August, $500,000. And the last, from November, $300,000. Jasmine kept her voice even. "And what were you told about these payments?" "I was told not to list them under legal settlements. Just mark them special resolution in the ledger. I didn't ask questions." She turned to the panel. "Until now." Behind her, a large screen lit up. 3 documents side by side. Jasmine clicked a remote and overlaid the NDA, the same one signed by Trump. The payout date lined up exactly with the second transfer. The recipient, Minerva Foundation, matched the trust used by Jane Doe's legal team. Trump shifted. Not much, but enough. His hand reached for a water bottle and missed the cap. Jasmine continued, drawing a clean line down the screen, from Trump's signature to the wire confirmation to Jane's now sealed lawsuit. "This is what silence costs," she said. No one clapped, no one moved, but the silence had changed. It wasn't shock anymore. It was recognition, the kind that settles in when people start putting the pieces together. If this paper trail was never meant to exist, why did someone risk everything to keep a copy? The timeline was still glowing on the screen when Trump exploded. He shoved back his chair, half standing now, face red, voice thundering across the room. "This is political trash. That letter is fake. That girl doesn't even exist." Gasps broke out like cracks in a frozen lake. One aide froze mid-text. A cameraman leaned in, instinctively adjusting focus. But Jasmine didn't move. She stayed right where she was, shoulders square, face steady. She turned calmly to the committee. "Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to play a short video statement." The chair hesitated for half a second, then gave a sharp nod. "Proceed." The lights dimmed. The hearing room held its breath. The screen turned black. A flicker. Then a blurred face filled the screen. No features, just shadows. And a voice. Young, raw, shaking but controlled. "I was a kid. I trusted him. I still hear his voice. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't have to be. The tremble in her throat said more than any prosecutor could. Her words cut clean, deep, real. He told me I was special. He said no one would believe me, that if I talked, I'd ruin everything. Trump jolted. His hand slammed the oak table so hard the mic jumped. "Turn that off," he roared. His voice cracked with something more than anger. Panic. Reporters flinched. Staffers exchanged looks, but the video kept playing. The chair leaned forward, expression unreadable. "He's not in charge anymore." Trump sank back into his seat, breathing hard, eyes darting, mouth tight. For once, there were no comebacks, no jokes, just sweat collecting at the base of his collar. Jasmine stood still. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just watched the screen, like it was a gravestone finally getting its name etched in. When the video ended, the silence was heavier than his scream. 15 seconds. One voice. That was all it took. Now the room wasn't listening to Trump. It was listening to the echo. And when a man like that screams just to shut down a tape, what truth is he most terrified you'll hear next? The video ended, but its echo hadn't. No one spoke. No one moved. The screen faded to black, yet the weight of those 15 seconds still pressed against every wall in that chamber. What would you do if that trembling voice was your daughter's? And then, quietly, almost unnoticed at first, Melania Trump stood up. She'd been sitting near the back, behind the committee's perimeter. No expression, no reaction, just stillness. But now she reached up, removed the earpiece from her left ear, and laid it gently on the velvet-padded seat. One camera caught it, then 3, then 20. It played out like a scene from a film, slow, deliberate, unreal. She didn't say a word, didn't touch her husband, didn't look at him, just turned and walked straight down the side aisle, heels echoing with every step. Trump's head snapped toward her, his lips parted, but he said nothing. Behind him, his aides froze. Reporters glanced at one another. One whispered, "Did she just?" Another replied, "She's gone." Jasmine didn't follow her with her eyes. She just lowered her gaze back to the envelope on the table, ran her fingers across the crease, and whispered almost too softly for the mic to catch. "Even the ones closest to him are walking away." Trump stared at the now empty chair, blinked, once, twice. His fingers gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. He looked smaller now. Not the giant he'd fashioned himself to be, but just a man in a room too big to contain the truth he'd run from for years. The silence felt different this time. Not tense, not angry, just exposed. Like everyone in the room saw something they weren't supposed to see. Melania didn't slam the door. She didn't have to. Her exit was louder than any shout, because when someone that close walks away without a word, what part of the truth just got too loud for even her to stay? The chair Melania left behind still sat empty, like it meant something. Trump glanced at it again and again, like expecting it to fill itself and make this whole thing go away. But it didn't, and he didn't say a word. The tension in the room wasn't theatrical anymore. It was personal. Jasmine stood, calm, steady. "Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call Dr. Clara Reeves." She didn't have to raise her voice. The name alone brought back the weight. Clara entered from the side, professional, grounded, no camera makeup, just quiet confidence and a brown leather notebook clutched in her hand. She raised her right hand, took the oath, and sat down with the kind of stillness you only learn from years of hearing other people's pain. "I'm a trauma psychologist," she began. "I met Jane Doe in July of 2016. She was referred to my clinic after her legal team noticed behavioral signs they couldn't explain. She didn't talk much, but what she wrote said more than anything she could have spoken." Clara opened the notebook and flipped to a marked page. She journaled almost obsessively. Dates, descriptions, reactions. And we later discovered something disturbing. Many of her entries aligned with a man's private travel schedule. She nodded at Jasmine, who clicked the remote. The screen lit up. On one side, Jane's diary in faint blue ink. On the other, Trump's Mar-a-Lago itinerary obtained just last year. Side by side, date for date. She remembered everything, Clara continued. Not just events, details, the color of the carpet, the shape of the ice sculpture, the temperature in the hallway, and she remembered the cologne. There was a quiet shift in the room, not outrage, just silence, deep and thick like fog. Jasmine zoomed in on one line. "He said I was prettiest when I cried." No one moved, no one spoke. In your professional opinion, Jasmine asked, could this have been fabricated? Clara didn't blink. No, that kind of trauma lives in the body. She didn't invent those memories. She relived them every time she picked up that pen. Trump's eyes stayed down. His cufflink twisted in his hand, but he still didn't speak. Because when a girl's trauma matches a billionaire's schedule line for line, how many more have pages no one's ever bothered to read? The air still hadn't cleared from Clara's testimony when Jasmine stepped back to the mic, but now her energy had shifted. No longer solemn, now razor sharp. What came next wasn't about memory, it was about proof, the kind that comes with timestamps, signatures, and digital fingerprints you can't delete. Members of the committee, she said, you've seen the letter, you've seen the diary. Now let's talk about the deal. She opened a new folder, thicker, printed in black and white, and clipped at the corner. This is an internal email chain dated July 2017 between Donald Trump's former legal counsel and Jane Doe's attorney. These emails were provided under subpoena. They were never meant to see daylight. Aides leaned forward. Reporters grabbed their phones. Even a few Republican staffers went stiff. Jasmine clicked to the first slide. On screen appeared a plain text email. No spin, no legalese. Just cold negotiation. As long as she refrains from any public statement or media contact, the donation to her family's nonprofit will remain in place. She paused, let it hang, then moved to the next one. Any breach, and the remainder of the funds will be withheld. We trust this remains confidential. A ripple of whispers ran through the back rows. Journalists already tweeting, legal analysts texting producers. Was this a hush agreement? Or worse, witness tampering? Trump sat upright now, jaw clenched. Then he barked, "That's attorney-client. You can't..." But the chair didn't even look at him. Former counsel, subpoenaed. You'll remain silent. Jasmine turned back to the screen. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut deeper now. Clearer, stronger. You didn't just buy her silence, she said. You leased her fear, month by month, installment by installment. And when she ran out of strength, you kept the meter running. Trump's eyes locked on her now, but he said nothing, because he couldn't. Jasmine let that silence linger, then quietly. This wasn't a settlement. It was a contract of control, and she was just a child. The hearing room felt smaller, heavier, like it had swallowed its own oxygen. Because if silence came with a payment plan, how long has fear been collecting interest? Just when it felt like the hearing had shown everything, Jasmine called one final name. Ms. Elena Monroe, please step forward. Heads turned. No one recognized her. A woman in a simple gray dress stood from the back row. No makeup, no press, just raw presence. She walked slowly to the witness table, her heels steady but her hands trembling. She looked nothing like a political figure. She looked like someone who'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. I'm Jane Doe's sister, she said, barely above a whisper. I was 18 the first time she went to one of those events. She didn't need notes. The memories hadn't faded. She came home that night shaking, Elena continued. Her dress was torn. She was bleeding, and she wouldn't speak. Not that night. Not for days. The room fell silent. Even Trump looked frozen. His arms were crossed, but he wasn't blinking. We were told it was a donor party, Elena said. Important people. Secret location. She was told to smile, look nice, and not ask questions. Jasmine didn't rush her. She waited. Let the story breathe. Elena exhaled. I've carried this for years. I wanted to protect her, but silence didn't protect either of us. It just kept them safe. Jasmine leaned in. Her voice cracked slightly. So why now? Why speak today? Elena turned toward her. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was firm. Because Jasmine Crockett showed us that silence doesn't protect us. It protects them. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Even the cameras held still. Then someone sniffled in the press box. A senator wiped his eyes. And across the country, Twitter lit up like wildfire. She Remembers climbed to the top of the national trending list. 22 states, millions of reposts. Thousands of women began sharing their own stories, some for the first time in decades. Jasmine didn't smile. She just closed her folder and whispered, "Thank you for not letting her carry it alone anymore." Because when one voice dares to speak, and another follows right behind it, how many more are still waiting to be heard? The final witness stepped down. The folder was closed. The envelope, now creased at the corners, sat in the middle of the table like a loaded gun no one dared touch. The chair cleared his throat, beginning the official wrap-up. But the hearing was already over in spirit. The room had heard what it came to deny. Trump leaned forward, both hands flat on the desk. His face was flushed, his tie slightly loosened. He glanced at the cameras but never met their gaze. "These are stories," he said, voice hoarse. "Not facts, theater, scripted lies." But no one clapped, not even his aides. The words came out too late, too thin, too cracked to hold up the armor he always wore. Jasmine didn't rush to respond. She stood with quiet precision, every movement deliberate, like she understood this wasn't just an ending, it was a mirror. She looked at him, not with rage, not with pity, but with unflinching truth. "If it were fiction, sir," she said softly, "you wouldn't be sweating." He flinched, just a little, but it was enough. There it was, the split screen. One man surrounded by power but unable to look anyone in the eye, and one woman unshaken, standing alone but backed by truth that wouldn't stay buried. Across the country, the reaction was instant. Polling sites saw spikes mid-broadcast. Swing state independents shifted. News banners updated in real time. Hearing fallout already swaying public opinion. And in the hearing room, even the walls seemed to lean in closer. Trump dabbed his forehead. Jasmine didn't move. The moment wasn't loud, but it was loud enough to break something that had never cracked before. Because this wasn't about just one girl, or one envelope, or one scandal. It was about who still gets to speak, and who still thinks they can silence her. What if the most powerful room in America isn't the one with cameras, but the one that's finally paying attention? By nightfall, the hearing wasn't just news, it was everywhere. CNN aired it in full. MSNBC replayed it with commentary. But it was YouTube where it exploded. Within 48 hours, the clip of Jasmine reading the letter, followed by the scream, the slam, and Melania's silent exit, had racked up over 34 million views. People weren't just watching, they were remembering. Letters began surfacing online. Handwritten scans, typed documents, anonymous stories buried for decades. Some dated back 10 years, others 40. A teacher in Chicago, a nurse in Idaho, a grandmother in Alabama who wrote, "I've never told anyone until now." The hashtags multiplied. "She remembers" became "we remember." One woman posted a picture of a torn dress from 1992. Another posted a burned diary page. The country didn't just react. It reopened wounds and started cleaning them. Trump's team scrambled into damage control. They booked friendly interviews, released statements, blamed deepfakes, leftist setups, even hinted that Jasmine had fabricated the entire hearing. But none of it stuck, because the footage wasn't polished, it was raw and real, and people could feel the difference. Jasmine didn't post a single word, but her inbox flooded. Letters, emails, DMs, a few threats, yes, but drowned out by thank you notes written like prayers. Some came with photos, others just a single line. One message read, "You didn't just defend her, you defended us all." She read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside her drawer, right next to Jane's envelope. Outside, the noise kept growing, but something had shifted. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice, clear and unwavering, to remind a nation that silence isn't peace. It's a debt, and eventually someone has to pay it back. What happens when one act of truth sets off a chain of memory? Maybe we're about to find out. The storm outside had quieted, but Jasmine's office was still lit. The folder was gone. The screen was dark. But on her desk, a new envelope waited. No seal, no lawyer, just a name, handwritten in shaky ink. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the corners. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, lined and creased. The handwriting was young, uneven. The words, anything but. "I'm 19. I've never told anyone. He said no one would believe me. But you made me believe I can say his name. Thank you for saying it first." Jasmine didn't cry. She didn't need to. She just sat still, paper in hand, heart steady. Her breath came deep and quiet. Then she reached for a pen. Simple, black ink. No hesitation. She wrote one line, not rehearsed, just true. "You say it now. I'll be here when you do." She folded it gently, set it beside the letter, then leaned back in her chair, eyes closed, not from exhaustion, but from something else, something like peace, something like purpose. Outside the window, the Capitol lights stayed on. The world hadn't changed overnight, but maybe the silence had. Because sometimes justice doesn't come in headlines or handcuffs. Sometimes it doesn't wear a robe. Sometimes she wears navy blue, walks alone, and reads a letter that shakes the world. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive through a courtroom verdict. It begins with one person brave enough to speak, giving others permission to remember, to feel, and finally, to heal. Jasmine didn't just defend a young girl. She lit a path for countless others who thought their silence would last forever. If you've ever stayed silent out of fear, maybe this is the moment to find your voice again. If this story stirred something deep within you, don't let it fade. Hit subscribe, like, and share so others know they're not alone in the fight for truth. Because every voice that rises breaks another chain of silence. This story is created for inspiration and reflection. It does not represent any individual or organization. Viewer interpretation and discussion are encouraged, but final responsibility rests with each audience member. Now it's your turn. Which moment spoke to you the loudest? The fear, the truth, or the courage to face both?